So I have this saying that I use with my clients, and it's more of a barometer to check yourself. So are you using these tools as a walking stick? Meaning if that walking stick broke right now, you would continue to climb up that hill. Or are you using them as a crutch, AKA seeking your salvation within them? So are you seeking your happiness, your peace, your ability to move forward in whatever this is? And I see a lot of people doing that with human design, astrology, different things like that. They're great. They're fun. But in all reality, you have your answers within, and only you truly know who you are. And when we're constantly looking outside of us, that means we're seeking our happiness and peace outside of us when it's actually within you.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. Today I have on the show Ashley Abramson, and Ashley is an inner child guide, a self-love mentor, and calls herself a social worker gone rogue because she is using her social work background and her expertise on the impact of childhood traumas, and she's supporting women to really heal the innermost parts of themselves and guide them on their journey to clear out the noise that's been running their life and holding them back from the answers within. And we are diving deep into this whole self-discovery journey that so many of us are on, and this kind of movement for people to rediscover themselves and discover who they really are. And we talk a lot about this and about what it really looks like to do inner child healing and forgiveness. And Ashley is not a huge fan of all of these personality tests that kind of put us in boxes, but what it really looks like to know the power within and what that looks like, and setting boundaries and reflecting on ourselves and healing. Such a good conversation. And Ashley has so many valuable takeaways here that I think will shift your perspective on a lot of this kind of self-healing, self-discovery movement that's out there right now. So I'm excited to jump into this conversation. Let's dive in. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Ashley, and we have so many things to dive into with her as the inner child guide that she is. So I'm so excited that you're joining us today, Ashley. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hope, for having me. I'm super excited to just have a good conversation.
Me too. So typically when I have I have other health practitioners, and everybody's got their own health story, right? That gets them into this health space. And you are in the wellness space in a sense, but in more of a spiritual sense. And so there's a story behind that, right? A story that got you into this space. So can you share your journey into becoming this inner child guide and doing all of this inner work that you do?
Yeah, so it really started a long time ago when I was young. I was a very vibrant child, loud, curious, but a lot of the adults around me, it was a lot for. My energy was a lot. My father was very much so like me. He was very childlike and just had this zest for life. And I resonated so well with him. But as I grew up, society and in the adults around, and when I became more privy to the conversations or just eavesdropping, heard more and more about how, well, he's mentally ill, he's childlike. It was a really negative connotation. And so I continued to lock myself up more and more and become the version that society wanted me to be, the one that listens, doesn't question, does what is told, and really just fit in. All of my report cards when I was young, I think, said talks too much. So it was reiterated constantly, you are not fitting into society. So at the age of 17, I was just absolutely miserable, constantly trying to be someone I wasn't. I attempted to take my own life. I was almost successful. Doctors say it's a miracle I lived. But still at that point, I didn't feel worthy of still being here and thought like my life was meant to be dedicated to someone else. And that's when I found my ex-husband and my son. And in the midst of that, my father ended up committing suicide and he was successful in the process. And it was really then that I was like, okay, I am just meant to be like this vessel to ensure other people's happiness, and I'm not worthy of this life. And I really see now that I definitely shouldn't go back to that child before that I locked up, because I mean, my dad ended up being successful. And so that's really what my life looked like. I went into, I adopted my son. I went into a helping profession, which is child protection, just really dedicated my entire life to others, but not in the way I do today, right? Like you work with others. I work with others today as well, but not at the sacrifice of myself. That this was at the sacrifice of myself.
Right.
And then, along that journey, I was diagnosed with bipolar. I was told I would never have a career. I would never obtain a college degree. That's shortly after my suicide attempt. And I lived that narrative for a while. And then, like I said, I went and proved them wrong and got my degree and, worked in one of the highest burnout rate jobs there is. And then, the biggest turning point was at 32, I thought I was the happiest emotionally, mentally, physically I had ever been. I was part of an MLM that was really big into personal development and mindset work. And so I was meditating, I was eating super healthy, I was working out, I was reading all the personal development, I was going to all the workshops and, doing all the mindset work. And then I was getting a divorce, and literally everything in my life, I realized that resulted in happiness was outside of me. And in a matter of a second, it was all being taken away. My title as a mother, my home, my car, my status, just all the things. And I was like, I again went back to the I'm unworthy, and I self-destructed very quickly because I couldn't find happiness. I couldn't find worthiness. It was all based on things outside of me. And though I was very mentally sound in the mindset, there was a lot of deep work that still had yet to be done. And when you go through a huge life event like that, it's essentially a death, but the person is still alive. It's like mindset work is wonderful, but it won't withstand a major life event like that if you have not done the deep work to heal the true narratives. I see mindset work as a Band-Aid when you have deep trauma, which, to be honest with you, we all do. Trauma is not just you were physically, sexually, emotionally abused. It goes so much deeper than that. So mindset work can be just kind of like this smoke and mirrors to make you feel as though, but then when something major like this happens, you're like, oh crap. So I got in trouble at work and my feet were held to the fire. And this beautiful woman came into my life and held the light when I didn't have it. And she really saw me not for the woman I was before my divorce, but for that little girl, that version of me, the one I had locked up 30 years prior, 25 years prior. And she held the light, and she just met me with non-judgment. She was the exact mirror I needed to go deep and to heal that inner child, and not necessarily go back and visit those dark places, but to address in the moment the behaviors that were coming up and, making a catastrophe of my life today, and understand how those related and heal them now and forgive them in the moment. And I remember when I was in my darkest place trying to Google fix myself, I attempted to Google, what should I do? And everything I read said I was doing exactly what I shouldn't be doing. Which just produced more shame and guilt. No one was out there being honest about, this sucks, right? You're probably going to the bar, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person. You are just trying to survive. And so it was you need to go to church. You need to you need to do all these positive things. And I could barely shower in the morning, let alone venture into any of that. So that's really when I stepped into creating my own business. I was like, I never want another woman to not have the opportunity to use a life event, or not even a life event, to just transform and experience unconditional self-love.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think today there's a big movement to self-love, but I still think it's very conditional.
Yeah.
So this is a deeper level of complete unconditional self-love. And my journey from there has progressed into a multitude of different ways. And, I work with people one-on-one to clear out that noise in the societal programming, like I did. And I constantly am doing the work myself and just asking more questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And not stopping at one idea until I've gotten to a place where I really feel like, okay, this is my truth. But I didn't stop until I felt like I found it. And even within that, I'm still asking questions and still exploring within how that comes about. So that was a really long answer.
No, it was a great one. I mean, I feel like it's all important details, all important parts of your story. No, but there's so many things to untangle there. Thank you for sharing your story. And that is powerful. And I like that something that got my attention. You were talking about how, you were doing all the self-development things and the self-help things and the meditating and the eating and all of those things. And I had a conversation with a guest a while back. We were talking about how, like, we can use all the spiritual things to kind of, can kind of keep us from real healing, right? And that's kind of what you were saying. Like, you were doing all these things, and then when your world fell apart again, you were like, oh, well, realized my identity was still tied into, all these things. And, I was tied to all these things. So I guess my question is, how have you found, because I'm sure you work with women where this too is, it's more of a distraction, or it just kind of blocks us from a lot of the healing. So because we think we're doing the right thing, right? We think we're doing the right thing by doing the self-development work and the meditations and all of that, which all of those are great things. But if it's holding us back from the true healing, then we're not getting to the root cause, right? So I guess your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's so true. So I have this saying that I use with my clients, and it's more of a barometer to check yourself. So are you using these tools as a walking stick? Meaning, if that walking stick broke right now, you would continue to climb up that hill. Or are you using them as a crutch, aka seeking your salvation within them? So are you seeking your happiness, your peace, your ability to move forward in whatever this is? And I see a lot of people doing that with human design, astrology, different things like that. They're great, they're fun. But in all reality, you have your answers within, and only you truly know who you are. And when we're constantly looking outside of us, that means we're seeking our happiness and peace outside of us when it's actually within you. So I promise you, you will never find it in human design. You will never find it in astrology. You will never find it in an ice bath. You will never find it, there, unless you are using those as kind of a guide, maybe. Right. But even that's very sticky. And recently I've come to this realization. I've always kind of thought this, but didn't fully understand that, in fact, we're a bunch of walking personal development encyclopedias that never integrate anything.
Totally.
So if you are consuming, 52 books a year they claim you should consume to be like the coolest person around. When are you integrating any of that? Right. You aren't. You are just constantly bringing in more and more and more. Right. And truly, like, to the listeners, if you stop today consuming any personal development and all you did was focus on clearing away the crap that's holding you back from your own answers within, you would be way further along in your journey than if you continue to listen to personal development at the rate of, even 20 books a year. Because you're like, no one outside of you is going to tell you who you are better than you are. And by no means am I saying like personal development is bad, but I think the shift we've made is we went from one extreme where going into the self-help section at Barnes and Noble was like uncool, right? Like nobody wanted to be seen in the self-help section at Barnes and Noble, to now it's like, that's all we can talk about
Right.
is what new personal development book are you listening to or reading? So it's like there's a middle ground of using it as a walking stick, but instead you're using it to find your happiness, find your peace, and also as a smoke and mirrors to yourself. Like you believe that you are healing because you are consuming,
Right.
when in fact, a Chinese proverb I absolutely love is to know and not do is to not know at all. So essentially it's just saying like you can consume and know all of these things, but if you don't actually do them, they mean nothing. You might as well not know them.
Right. I think the tricky part there is, and I'd love to hear your experience on working through this within yourself, but I think the tricky part sometimes there is people think, like, people may not recognize that that's what they're doing, right? Like they feel like, well, no, I am doing the things because I'm doing the meditations and I'm doing the affirmations and I'm doing, like, they feel like all these things that they're doing are the things that are going to get them where they're trying to go. So I guess what for you, and maybe from your experience, how did you get, like, I guess, recognize that within yourself that you're like, okay, there's a piece here I'm missing is I'm not doing that deep healing. And for you, I guess it started with the inner child work. So I guess how can people recognize that? And then what should they be doing instead? Like, what are the steps to get to that part?
Yeah. So, I mean, to be honest with you, if you just sat and listened, you would know. So until my divorce ripped everything out from under me, I always had this like inkling that I was actually avoiding something, but because society and everybody around me was like, no, like consume, go see Mel Robbins, go see Brendan Burchard, go see all these people and you'll be saved. I just allowed myself to not listen to myself, right? Like only and when you're not listening to yourself. So it's really that opportunity to, or ask so this is interesting actually that you bring this up, because recently I challenged a client, or I invited her in to take a week off of consuming personal. Almost crapped her pants when I said that. The look on her face was that of significant fear, right? And she also guides people on, journeys of healing. And so she also had kind of convinced herself that this was necessary for her work as well, was that she needed to, consume for 2 to 4 every day, when in fact, the ego was causing her to use it as another distraction from her own healing within. And we ended up agreeing at, taking 1 day off and seeing how it goes. And then she messaged me later and she's like, okay, I'm going to do a week. And she's done it. And she's been able to see that, first of all, she didn't die, right? Because we always think we're going to die. Right. And that things are coming up that would not have come up if she wouldn't have taken the space to listen. So maybe that's my answer, Hope, is if you are just even listening to this podcast, I would invite you in right now to be like, I'm going to take the next week off of not consuming any personal development. I mean, it's a week, right? Like if after the week you decide you want to go back to consuming the, 2 Audible books and 2 in-person reading books you're doing, great. But a week's not going to kill you. Right. And the cool thing is, like, if you're feeling prickled right now or any sort of resistance, well, that's what I call a flashlight, an opportunity within to go deeper and to understand, why is Ashley's invitation making me want to jump through this radio and hit her? Yes. Right. Yes. So I guess that's what I would say, Hope, is your own answers, right? I can't tell anybody about where they're at, but I invite you to take the next week off and then you'll know. As long as you sit and listen and that's the other tricky part, is some people would then fill it with like Netflix, Real Housewives or but not filling that space at all.
Right.
Just truly being in that space.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was about to ask you, because I know I've been guilty of that. And I mean, speaking of human design, I love human design and I use it in my programs with my clients, but I totally agree with you how we can use that to, distract ourselves. But the manifesting generator I am, I like to do, like, I'm a busybody. And so for me, that's the hard part, where it's like, well, now I got to find something else to do in that time. And I have been so guilty of that, where it's like, because we live in the age, right? We're just over consumption with anything. Like, it doesn't even matter if it's self-help or whatever. We just live in the age of overconsumption. And I have been guilty of that, where it's like, well, now I have to figure out, like, what to do with my time. Like, what am I going to do now? And that's the hard, because I so agree with you. And that's when I've gotten like the biggest, downloads, whatever you want to call them, intuitive downloads, whatever, it's when I've made this space for it, right? Like, they're not going to show up when you're constantly doing and consuming and all of that. So yeah, I mean, all that to say, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And I see that as, I see that as a real issue with a lot of people. And for me, in my world, it's with my clients, it's not so much, not necessarily, which some of them do. I guess some of them do like, self-development stuff. But for me, I work with clients that have chronic symptoms. For them, it's consuming every health guru. It's like every blog and every book and every, and so it's for them. And then it's like, it's just a bunch of jumbled noise in their head. They don't know what to do. So I feel like it's the same with the self-development. You're hearing all these things, and then it's kind of blocking out your own intuitive voice, right?
Yeah. And I would include that hope in personal development, because in my mind, when I think of personal development, it's just like consuming something to better you, right? Whether it's physically, mentally, because people do it with exercise and consuming or just participating in it, right? So we just have created a new addiction,
right?
Another line of addiction. We've got actual drugs, and we've got sex, and we've got shopping, and it's just one more thing we can become addicted to. But I would challenge you, Hope. So my thing is, and I love that you use human design with your clients and that you're very aware of like not using it as a crutch. But I believe though where you're at now, right now in the ego illusion, the human design very much so plays a part. But at your purest form, Hope, you want to be, meaning you don't want to do, you just want to be.
Right.
So the reason why you get your best downloads when you just be is because I truly believe, the word is inspired. That's in spirit, right? You can only be in spirit when you stop. When you stop interacting with the ego illusion around you and just be in spirit, be inspired.
Yep. I totally agree. I absolutely agree. With how do you help your clients, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess help them have a healthy relationship with self-development, for those like, and I'm a huge proponent of your recommendation, like, let's go without it for a while and see what happens. But for those who are like, I do like to better myself, I like to learn. I think how do you recommend like having a healthy relationship where it doesn't turn into a crutch or a distraction or whatever?
So I think everybody's relationship that is healthy or not, using those words is just such a labeling.
Yeah.
So it's different for everyone, right? Like it looks different. But I think you take that pause, like if you do the invitation and you take that pause, but then you actually bring awareness and then action based on what that pause brings up within you. So say something comes out like, some sort of belief about yourself or whatever, and you really hire a coach, go to a therapist, journal about it, whatever you need to do to unpack it, understand it, and forgive it is going to be huge. And you will realize as you have started doing that healing that you don't gravitate towards it as much, right? Because you are using it as a distraction.
Right.
So just like an alcoholic. So in AA, they talk about what's called a dry drunk. So that's essentially someone who isn't doing any work to heal the reason in which why they were drinking. They're just like putting the cork in the bottle. So they're this absolutely miserable person because they don't have that vice anymore to help them through the pain and whatever it may be. So essentially, I see it as the same, right? You can either be a dry drunk, or you can be actively working on yourself and healing those things to understand why you need personal development so much. And then once you've healed them, like your healthy relationship will just like come about.
Right.
And
It just happens.
for me, and for me, what it looks like is I really believe I've found what I believe to be truth. And I just really focus on that book and anything that supports it, and focus on that belief instead of what I call the spiritual buffet line. You know, so many of us are stuck in that spiritual buffet line, taking a bite from here, a bite from there, you know, whether it's a meditation, human design. Oh, I went and did ayahuasca. Oh, now I'm going to do mushroom. You know, it's all these little pieces that in their own you feel good in the moment, right? But they don't fulfill the need you are seeking because you're just dabbling. So really figure out what aligns with your truth, and then make that your dinner, make that your full meal, and quit dabbling into all these places, because you can't master anything if you were constantly eating bites of everything.
That's very true. That's very true. So to get to that point where, like, so for you, you mentioned the inner child healing, the inner child work for you. To get to the point where you are feeling like, you know, I don't, using air quotes here, quote unquote, like need this self-development stuff, right? I don't necessarily like have to have it to, you know, fill this void I'm trying to fill, or like I'm looking for the quote right answer, whatever. So how do we find that place of like love for ourselves? Because you mentioned that at the beginning when you were talking about, you know, helping women find that like unconditional love for themselves. Like what does that look like in terms of inner child healing and getting to that point where we can, because too, I think the other piece is like you mentioned like self-love for our past, because I think that's another thing that holds us back is it's like we have these stories in our head, and like you mentioned you dealt with a lot of like shame and stuff around who you were and all that, and that can really hold us back from, you know, moving on that healing journey. So being able to find that love for ourselves now, and our love for ourselves, you know, like for you it was for that little girl, how does that work?
Well, so I'm glad you asked that question, because often when people think of like inner child work, they think, oh, Ashley's going to take me back to this moment in my childhood and we're going to really unpack it and talk about it and heal it. No, what it is that little girl, little Hope, that was 2 years old at one point, is still within you, right? Like every single version of us is still within this illusion, and in operating within us and making decisions that maybe we're not aware of. So it's not about going back anywhere per se. It's about in the moment, what issues are you running into, and how can you show up as the parent for that little girl in this moment? So that looks like setting healthy boundaries. That looks like, you know, coming from a place of love. And yeah, sometimes memories will come back and flood in, and we just acknowledge them, understand them, and forgive them. And where I've gotten to is an even deeper level of understanding that once you really get to that place of clearing out the noise and listen to your own answers, you'll start to understand that because this is an illusion, it's just as if we're dreaming. So if I dreamt last night, Hope, that you ran over my dog, right? I would maybe wake up this morning and be upset with you. And then I would be like, why am I upset with Hope? And then I remember, oh crap, I had a dream last night that she ran over my dog, but it was just a dream. And in that second, all of the shame, guilt, anger, separation is immediately released because I realized it didn't really happen. Well, I'm a firm believer that we're just like daydreaming when we think we're awake, right? It's just as unreal as your actual sleeping dreams. So why the heck am I putting so much weight on this when this is actually not occurring? So getting to that level of forgiveness is really where I'm at in life, and forgiving things at that level. Not everybody's there right away. Sometimes you have to really work on the forgiveness and healing within the illusion, and then you can move to that. But it's all a very similar process. It's bringing things to the light that you've been allowing to hide in the corner, in the darkness, right? Because you didn't want to face them. And when something's in the corner, in the dark, it is impacting you way more than if you brought it to the light and saw it and were like, hey, I see you. I see how you're operating my life, but I'm going to choose different.
So I want to go back, because you said, I wanted you to explain a little bit about what you meant saying that you're a firm believer that we're in a daydream and that, what's happening isn't really happening. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Oh, okay. So we would probably need a whole bunch more podcast hours, Hope. But I believe there's a big movement. So a lot of listeners probably already have this relative understanding. And the Matrix movie was really helpful in people understanding that. And I'm not saying we are the Matrix, but I think it opened people's eyes to realizing this is a hologram. This is a hologram that we are living within, and everything is projected from one mind, and we're projected into many. So that is what I am saying. I'm saying this is truly a dream. We are not outside of this illusion. We are a type of awareness. So it's not like we're another being dreaming this. It's like I said, it would take a lot more of your podcast to talk about this, but essentially for the listeners, to make it simple, most of you have watched The Matrix, because I'm guessing our age group is your primary listeners. And we very much grew up with The Matrix. So, that's an illusion, right? That's a hologram in there. So, and depending on how they shift it and they're able to manipulate it, we are here too, but not in the, exact way, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter, right? They would get killed there. And only sometimes would it transfer into the real world. This cannot transfer at all, right? Outside of the illusion, we are eternal. Death does not exist. Only our body in this illusion can die. Us at our purest form as spirit, right? Like we talked before, in spirit, we are eternal beings.
Yeah, that was a good explanation. That was a very good explanation in a very short period. I was wondering how you're going to
good, because it's a lot.
So yes, it is. And I'm in agreement with you. I wanted to get your take on it, and that was a good short explanation. So yes. So what were some of the things for you when you first started your inner child healing, inner child work, whatever? What were some of the first steps that you took to really dial in on that healing, specific steps that you took?
Awareness. I would say the first thing is just awareness. If you spend the next 6 months just getting curious, like a child, literally think of a 2-year-old, right? They ask you 15 million questions. And even if you answer, why is the banana yellow? Well, because it is. Well, they still want to know why it is, right? They will keep asking deeper and deeper and deeper. Get curious on why you are operating the way you are, even down to the smallest things. Why do you wear your shoes in your house? Why do you not wear your shoes in your house? And you will find that you are operating from a lot of shit that has nothing to do with you or your decisions. So I'll give you an example. When I moved to Florida, I was buying a brand new car, and all of my adult life, pretty much, except for 1 or 2 cars, they were silver. And all growing up as a child, the vehicles were silver. And I just knew I didn't like white vehicles. I didn't know why, but I didn't like white vehicles. And so I called my mom up on the phone and I said, oh, I'm getting a new RAV4. And she's like, you better not be getting a white car. And I had this light bulb, and I was like, do I not like white vehicles, or did she teach me this? So you bet your ass, Hope, I own a white RAV4 and I absolutely love it. And it was a test for me to understand, was this something I learned, or was this actually something I decided? And it wasn't.
Yep.
And you will just get curious for the next 6 months. Just really, and keep a journal, keep notes in your phone, whatever, and just start unpacking as much as you can in your life. And then after you've had the curiosity, it may even come up within the 6 months, because I'm a firm believer that you can only just live in a state of awareness for so long before action must be taken because you beat yourself up so much.
Right.
But the cool thing is you can't choose or take action unless you have awareness, right? So to me, awareness is like 80% of the actual healing.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Well, and then once it's in it, and I've read this in a few different books, but I know a mentor that I've worked with before, she would always say that, like, the things when it's safe to like feel certain things and heal certain things, that's when it's brought to your awareness, right? Like your subconscious is going to keep things hidden when, if it doesn't feel like it's safe. So once you feel it and the awareness piece is there, then it's like, okay, that's when it's time to heal it. So yeah, I agree with you. So do you have, as we're kind of wrapping up here, and you've given so many things for people to contemplate here. So I love all of this insightful conversation. I could talk about this all day, really.
I know, me too.
Do you have any last kind of, that's the word I'm looking for. I don't want to say tips because I feel like that kind of like devalues what I'm trying to get from you, but I guess other insightful things that you want to leave people with in terms of like really diving into their healing journey and really finding that unconditional self-love for themselves. And for women who maybe are discovering now, listening to this conversation, like, crap, I am using this self-help discovery thing as like a crutch or distraction, just kind of, initial steps to take to start moving in that healing direction and uncovering like what their truest self.
Yeah. So I always end all my posts or anything with this because it was just such an impactful statement for me after my divorce. And that's, remember, you're worth it, right? Like you are worth the time to bring awareness to what's going on. You're worth all of it. And in the end, only you know your answers within. No one else knows your answers. And we're all just walking each other home. That's a quote by Ram Dass. I live every single day by. So just remember, we are in this together. You are not alone. You are worth it. And you have the answers. It's not about finding anything. It's not about seeking. It's not like this scavenger hunt. It's clearing out the stuff that's getting you from hearing it, from remembering. It's right there. It's waiting for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I love Ram Dass, so I love that. I love it. Okay, so I have one more question I want to ask you as we wrap up that I like to finish up with. But before I do that, can you let everybody know where they can find out more about you, working with you, and all the work you're doing with, you have your method that, I guess we basically talked about. We didn't talk specifically about it, but the unicorn effect. So where can they learn more about you?
Yeah. So, bigmiracleenergy.com is my website. It's on its way up. So I'm guessing it'll be up by the time it's out. Ash_Abramson on Instagram. And then my Patreon channel is also Big Miracle Energy. So, and I love to have conversations, reach out. Let's chat. Tell me, if you take my invitation for the week off, I would absolutely love to hear how it goes for you and if it was impactful and if it provided you a level of awareness that you didn't have prior.
I love that. Perfect. And of course, I'll have links to all that in the show notes for y'all to check out. So the last question I want to ask you, Ashley, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
The most important thing you can do to live with purpose is to get to a point where you can hear your own answers within. To get to that voice you have within that knows your purpose.
That's big. That's big. And I feel like so often that voice is disguised as like the story about your mom resonates, like not knowing what's ours and what somebody else's. So a lot of times that voice is hidden behind other people's voices. So I love that. That's such a good answer.
And if you have to question it, like, oh, is this my voice or someone else's? Guess what? It's someone else's.
Totally.
You know when it's your voice.
Yep, totally. I love that. Thank you so much, Ashley. This was such a fun conversation. I appreciate your insight and what you're doing as the inner child guide that you are. Just thanks so much for joining us and sharing that with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Hope.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I'd love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I can know how to provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics you'd like to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza, or you can visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.